As populations age, non-invasive neuromodulation has a tremendous ability to help take patients out of hospitals, keep them at home, reducing the cost of healthcare while also improving their quality of life, which is certainly where I'm coming from. I love neuromodulation because I believe that there are 5, 10 additional areas that can be non-invasive neuromodulation that have the ability to really impact patients' lives and their quality of life, while also being significantly less expensive.
Welcome, MedTech Gurus. Today, as I mentioned in the introduction, we're joined by Isaac Oppenheim, CEO and founder of Zida, a company pioneering at the intersection of aging, neuromodulation, and wearable health tech. Isaac's journey is both deeply personal and professionally groundbreaking, inspired by his grandfather, a Holocaust survivor who struggled with an overactive bladder, sometimes known as OAB, and Isaac set out to create a better solution for the more than 40 million Americans living with OAB, particularly patients over 55 who are disproportionately affected. Under his leadership, Zida developed the Zida Control Sock, the first FDA-cleared home-use neuromodulation device for OAB. This innovative therapy is non-invasive, Medicare-covered, and designed with the comfort and usability of the consumer wearables in mind, drawing on decades of textile and product design expertise from brands like Nike and Lululemon. What makes Isaac's story especially unique is that he accomplished all of this from invention to FDA clearance to securing HCPCS codes and Medicare reimbursement without institutional capital. Clinical results have been equally impressive, showing nearly 80% treatment success, with patients reporting significant reductions in urgency, frequency, and incontinence after just 12 weeks of weekly at-home use. Isaac is here to share his journey of perseverance, design thinking, and patient-centered innovation, offering valuable lessons for every one of our gurus listening out there. Hey, Isaac, are you ready to be our guru today?
Yes, I am. Thank you for having me today.
We're excited to have you. So tell us something fun or interesting about yourself or your family so we can get to know you a little better.
Sure. So I am today the CEO of a medical device company, but I started out my career in the world of textiles. I ran a factory where we developed some of the world's first wearable technologies, things like heart rate sensing bras for Adidas and, call it the underwear elastic that you would buy at the mall. Came from a lot of our machines. So I like to say that my journey and entrance into the world of medical devices has been about weaving technology into fabric, quite literally, and now into healthcare. So I'm not sure how many people can say that.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. It just kind of amplifies that, how one expertise can start to lead to another and move along the pathway, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's fun. So, Isaac, as mentioned, your grandfather's struggle with OAB inspired you to found Zida. Maybe you can share a little more of that story and how it shaped your mission to tackle this really widespread condition.
Sure. So, as I mentioned, I started my career in the world of textiles. And one of the things that really attracted me to the world of textiles was the wearables applications, which kind of led us into the world of wearables and implantables. We did we were a subcontractor for a startup that made a stent, a cardiac stent that was later acquired by Edwards Life Sciences. So I went on this trip with my grandfather, who was 93 at the time. It was a family roots trip that we went to Germany, and kind of instead of experiencing a triumphant homecoming for, my grandfather, a Holocaust survivor, along with, the extended family, he was, humiliated. And we as his family were ashamed for him, and ashamed, to a certain degree for ourselves. We were embarrassed because of his challenges controlling his bladder. And that moment, seeing my grandfather, who came to the United States at age 13 with literally nothing, who had built, himself to the point where he was, a leader in the community in Baltimore, a leader of, owning and small businesses and being the manager of a factory. It showed me how something small, just tiny, call it medically. Nobody's ever died of overactive bladder, but it stripped away his dignity. It ruined my day, and it stayed on my mind for so long. What really bothered me was my family, my aunts, uncles who are in the medical profession. My uncle's a dentist, my aunt's a nurse. Went back with my grandfather to Baltimore, and I followed up with him and I said, "Hey, what can we do to help?" And they said, "Well, we went to the doctor, and given the fact that he's 93 and he's taking a bunch of other medications, and he's not so mobile, basically go buy diapers." And that was an answer that was unacceptable to me. Luckily, I like I said, I had a foot in the water of medical devices, and I'm blessed that my father-in-law is a Yale medical school graduate and helped me, go through the science and investigate what possibilities there were out there. And he introduced me to his former classmates who, specialized in urology. He was a hematologist, but, was able to introduce me to the right people. And that inspired me, call it that personal motivation, what has led me from the problem through the solution. And also call it, on the days that are really hard, fighting with, whether it's insurers, fighting with Medicare, fighting with the FDA, to get through the tremendous process that it is to get a medical device approved and onto the market in the United States or, generally around the world.
Yeah, that's truly inspirational. And I think, trying to help a patient with dignity in what can be a very impersonal, healthcare delivery system is a very admirable mission.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Zida was born from that idea that people deserve better. And it's the treatment that we've invented is a treatment that just restores confidence, independence, and the ability to get back to quality of life that the people we love most deserve. It's spouses, it's parents, it's the ones we love.
Yeah, for sure. So, in kind of following up on that, overactive bladder, if I've got this right, impacts more than 40 million Americans. And the burden is especially heavy for older adults, as we're just kind of talking. So, from your perspective, why has OAB remained such an underserved condition?
Yeah, I think that overactive bladder, which, as you mentioned, affects more than 41 million Americans, it's chronically underserved because the existing treatments are flawed. The medications that have existed up until today have both poor efficacy, they've got troubling side effects. The two major classes of drugs that have historically been used to treat overactive bladder are associated with dementia, and both the American Urology Association and the American Urogynecological Society recently advised against prescribing those types of drugs. So it's no surprise that over the past, call it 20 years, that patients haven't wanted to take those medicines, nor have doctors really wanted to prescribe them. On the other kind of end of that spectrum, there are neuromodulation implants that effectively do the same thing as our device, but they cost tens of thousands of dollars, and you just have to have surgery for them to put in a device into your body. So that's what that really results in is 77, 78% of patients never get treatment because the options that they hear about are so bad that they don't even want them. They're embarrassed to begin with about the problem. And so it's this loop of people who just suffer in silence.
Yeah.
I can tell you that when we were training the primary investigator to run our clinical trial, we bumped into a lady who was so depressed over her overactive bladder. And we started inquiring why. She said, "Look, my daughter says that she won't come to visit me at home anymore. because my house smells and I smell and the grandkids don't want to see me. And that was just something that broke my heart in terms of this was a lady who was desperate for a solution and had none. And luckily, most patients are not that bad, but most patients do stop doing what they love to do, whether it's going out on their boat because there's no bathroom, or having their friends come to the boat, go on the boat with them, going golfing, going out for coffee, because I've got a plan where I'm going to find the bathroom along the way. So
yeah, that's what a challenge, and that is heartbreaking to hear. And so, if you would, the Zida Control Sock is really the first of its kind, from what I could find. I'm wondering if you can just take a moment and explain how it works and what patients experience. And then you've touched on it a little bit, but what sets it apart from traditional OAB therapies? Can you help us out with that?
Sure. So the Zida Control Sock itself is the world's first non-invasive wearable neuromodulation system. That's where we started from. The idea was to retrain the bladder to stop sending the signal to empty when it's not full, meaning somebody who went to the ball game and drank 6 beers, he needs to go to the bathroom, and there's nothing to do aside from to go to the bathroom. But overactive bladder is defined by people going to the bathroom more than 9 times a day, or feeling a sense of urgency that sometimes leads to missing the bathroom. We call that incontinence. How does the Zida Control Sock and how does neuromodulation work? It uses the tibial nerve, which has an access point at the ankle, and can both access the bladder plexus and reach the brain. And we use it kind of like plugging into, call it the Ethernet cable, right? We plug the Ethernet cable in, for our system using a sock. If you can put on a sock and align your heel and your toe, then you can use our patented device, which knows how to find your tibial nerve. If you can find the tibial nerve, we did not invent neuromodulation. A very nice doctor back at Yale Medical School invented it back in the late 70s. Medtronic and Boston Scientific both have implantable devices that use this technology. Well, my goal was just to make it much more accessible. When we're talking about my grandfather, an insurer wasn't going to pay the $50,000 to do an implant on a 93-year-old man. Whereas, had a device like mine been available, that costs hundreds of dollars, maybe single thousands of dollars if we're talking about somebody using it for, 10 years, then okay, that's great. The quality of life is worth it to that patient. And so, for the patient, like I said, it's as easy as putting on a sock once a week for 30 minutes. So not hard to do. It doesn't require surgery. You don't have to go to your doctor's office repeatedly. It's not hard to use. It doesn't require complicated training. And I think when you look next to the alternatives, which are pads or diapers, we're not masking the symptoms. We're actually treating the root cause.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I love the explanation. You really brought it home with that. Tibial nerve is like the Ethernet cable. That really brought it home for me. So thank you for that. So looking at this further, you have a clinical study that showed about 80% treatment success compared to a placebo. What were some of those key findings, and maybe even more importantly for our gurus out there, how did you structure a study to get to that and prove that real world effectiveness with the device? Can you help us out with that?
Sure. So we ran a double-blind sham-controlled clinical trial. We did that at the FDA's request. The FDA was very generous and kind. We did do it during COVID, which was a little bit of a challenge in and of itself, recruiting patients and what have you. But the clinical trial itself, like you mentioned, demonstrated an 80% success rate, meaning patients had fewer incontinence episodes or fewer episodes of urgency. So when we're talking about what are the metrics on that, the average patient experienced 71% fewer incontinent episodes, meaning somebody who was, having 3 or 4 per day, went down to 1, maybe 1 and change per day, which isn't where they want to be. And I think that's what, when we talk about what is the future of overactive bladder. It's getting to people to where they want to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants to be at 0 episodes of incontinence, and 62% fewer urgency episodes, meaning people who feel they need to desperately run to the bathroom. That's a really big metric, because it's the difference of me being able to feel comfortable to go out to dinner and having the confidence that I'm going to make it to the restaurant, right? Or I'm going to have to stop on the side of the road. There was a lawyer I spoke with from San Francisco who lived about an hour outside of the city. And she was about 57.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, look, I stopped going into the office and I'm a high-powered lawyer, but I kept finding myself squatting in the bushes on the side of the highway. And that's not that's not the person that I know myself to be. So yeah, after using the Zida Control Sock, I can go back to the office. Do I still want to sit in traffic? No, but I have that ability, I have that option, I have that choice, and that's something that is really meaningful when we're talking about the actual impact. The clinical definition of success is at least a 50% reduction in symptoms of either incontinence or urgency, or a 30% reduction in the number of visits to the bathroom. Mm-hmm. We also had 25% of patients who no longer met the definition of having overactive bladder. And that's important, that's great. Most of those patients actually still require long-term maintenance, mm-hmm. because even though they don't have the problem, we're not actually curing the problem, unfortunately. Right. Yeah. They require maintenance, and that's something that I think is really important when you're looking at your device and trying to think, how does this fit into the ecosystem, and how does this fit into a patient's life? Because you've got to habituate patients to using the medicine or the device, otherwise they're just going to fall off the wagon. And I can promise you, and this is what I tell doctors, I promise you, my device never works if it stays on their nightstand.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But it's easy to use, so it's likely to come off the nightstand.
It's also that, but it's also, set up, we work and we have, people who work with the patients to say, hey, what TV program do you watch every week? What night is that on? Excellent. It's on Monday night. You watch Matlock? Great. Yeah. Yeah. Every time you watch Matlock, you're going to put on the sock, you're going to turn it on, and you're going to do it. And if there's no Matlock, you're going to do it anyway. But anytime you see Matlock, you're doing this.
Yeah. I love that. So you touched on your FDA authorization, which is clearly a challenge. But what really intrigued me was you also secured a new HCPCS code and Medicare reimbursement, which is amazing. I'm just wondering if you could walk us through how you accomplished this, especially without institutional capital, which I know our gurus out there are going to want to learn more about that.
Sure. So, one of the things that I've found is that there is just kind of as a general rule, there is a wide audience or a wide group of experts who probably know the most and probably feel the least valued. And those are the people who are retired, the people who have been doing these things for 40 years. So, for example, we hired a lady who was an FDA expert, along with a firm. They were basically talking about closing down to a certain degree. They ended up selling in the end, but she was right before retirement. And I was willing to work really hard to take upon myself to do 80% of the work using her mind and her experience to help guide how those documents and what needed to be there. And at some point, yes, also take risks, in maybe, yes, having this document, not having that document, and will the FDA accept that? And in some cases, the answer was yes. In some cases, the answer was no. And we had to go scramble to find those things that were missing that we took as a calculated risk. Mm-hmm. With CMS and getting a billing code, same thing. Like mm-hmm. the guy, the gentleman that did our application for a HCPCS code, at least according to him, has done the most filings for new HCPCS codes that have been approved in the nation. He happens to be about 10 years retired. Mm-hmm. And I was introduced to him through a friend of a friend And again, I was willing to do call it the heavy lifting, and he gave his expertise, and that enabled us to take. We have one competitor on the market. I believe I know approximately what they paid for their CMS application process for a HCPCS code. I think they probably paid about 50 times what we paid.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not an exaggeration.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool, tapping into that experience, right? And leveraging that to help you out.
I mean, I think that particularly in the age of Chat GPT, where we're writing documents and making, creating those documents that you need to meet the format has become so much easier. It really comes down to the expertise that people have in the practical filings and the practical interactions with these regulatory bodies to know what they really, really want. Because artificial intelligence doesn't know what the decision making rubric and what the behind the scenes interactions were that led to called that final 510K letter being written, or the de novo letter being written, and that's what you can find in the public information. But the expert who helped walk through that actual process can help you shortcut those things.
Yeah, and I often find those types of experts also can tell you where the bear traps are, and make sure you don't step on those as well.
Yeah, I mean that is always my first question: is what should I not do?
Yeah,
forget about what I should do. What should I not do?
Yeah,
so
that's often most important.
Yeah, that is definitely the most important. With kind of with that mindset, like you mentioned, we got our 510K clearance, we got CMS billing codes and fee schedules published. And more importantly, you can call it win the battle, get the billing code, get the fee schedule. I know of a number of companies that have gone through that process, but Medicare hasn't paid, or most insurers haven't paid $1 for that product. And so alignment and trying to work with the system, and Medicare is a complicated organization to work with. But if you find the right advocates who connect to your product, if you find Overactive Bladder is relatively easy, right? I walk into a room, most of the leaders of the organization are close to 55. Their spouse, their parents probably suffer from overactive bladder. There's a lot more grace given than perhaps for even more important device, which deals with a more orphan condition or syndrome.
Yeah, that personal connect is nice to have, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
That is, and today we're seeing about 60% of our patients who are covered by traditional Medicare. And to date, just to your question about how much money has it taken, I'm about $3 million in from myself, from friends and family. And so that's pretty good in terms of, how much money we've spent to do this.
Yeah, that is quite good, actually. And shifting the conversation for just a moment, because we touched on earlier that you drew on expertise from your textile experience, and also major brands like Nike and Lululemon in designing your product. And I just want to reinforce for our gurus out there, why is it so important to bring that level of wearable comfort and design thinking into a medical device?
Sure. So I think that one of the things that I learned, having dealt with a bunch of startups and even corporates like Adidas, who envisioned replacing making an alternative so that women could use polar halters. I'm dating myself here, right? A polar halter was this strap that men used to wear around their chest before there was this thing called an iPhone, and nobody could even imagine it, that would measure your heart rate and your breathing. It was a device that men would wear around their chest while they went out running, and women weren't able to do that. So Adidas was like, oh gosh, let's make a halter that women can use. Well, that was a great idea. The challenge was that women switched their bras a lot more frequently than men would switch these straps, which was probably never, because they're men and these are women. There's also a lot more fabric involved in bras than there are in a polar halter strap. and men are just dirtier probably, but there was no need. The need to use that wearable was not strong enough. And that was why when we were looking at developing this product, my consideration was whether to make it a reusable product or a disposable. Mm-hmm. All the gurus told me to make it disposable, by the way, because disposable in medical devices is where the money is. Right. From my perspective, my goal was to make this accessible, to make this affordable, and to help patients. That was my primary motivation. And I know how to make socks. I know how to make textiles. It's something that my team knows anatomy and physiology well. The challenge that the FDA had with our product was not a question of does neuromodulation for overactive bladder work, but prove to us that you can find the tibial nerve so that you can stimulate it and get the same benefits that more invasive technologies use. So the burden of proof was a little bit different. But the general idea that I came from a world of manufacturing was tremendously helpful. And I can give you a couple insights. Aside from the fact that, of course, we don't actually have a problem manufacturing our product. We just do it. That's our bread and butter. That's my team's experience. But there are so many small insights that if you don't come with manufacturing experience and expertise, that you'll potentially bump over. I'm a small startup, right? I'm not venture capital backed. Inventory is a challenge for me. Shipping is a challenge for me because I have to have product made and I have to ship it. Most products, and if they have electronics, end up getting made somewhere not in the United States, right? So one of the examples that we bumped into was, should we use a rechargeable battery, a lithium-ion battery, or should we use an alkaline battery? What's the difference? Obviously, a rechargeable battery allows you to make a much smaller device because it's form-fitted to the housing. It's it certainly looks better, but lithium-ion batteries can't be shipped. Commercial shipments of lithium-ion batteries, as we all know, can't get on planes. So as a small startup, where I don't know whether I need one product this month to deliver to market, 100 products or 1 million this month, having the flexibility of using an alkaline battery made a tremendous impact on our financial management and also our inventory management ability. That's a little bit of why, in my mind, having the manufacturing component is really important.
Yeah, I can see that. And I was intrigued too by the decision about disposable versus reusable. And I can see the temptation for disposable, but I'm thinking that reusable design probably helped in your uptake in getting some traction with this, just because of the outline and cost involved in it. Am I heading down the right path with that?
So I believe so. The world of insurers is a little bit opaque. I'm sure that's an understatement, but the fact that insurers are choosing to cover this definitely has to do with the fact that it is less expensive. Could we have made it, from an environmental perspective, reusable is better. And at the end of the day, I'm an Eagle Scout, I'm a Boy Scout, I like the environment, and so we're going to go with that as opposed to something that's disposable. Sorry. Yeah. I guess at the end of the day, I'm at fault.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, though. I love the Eagle Scout part of that. So, Isaac, looking at this, I discovered, neuromodulation is really a rapidly growing field with applications that go far beyond OAB. So I'm wondering if you can share with us what you see are some of the more exciting opportunities for neuromodulation, especially in aging and chronic care. Do you have any insights for us?
Sure. Neuromodulation, I think, is one of the most exciting frontiers in medicine, particularly when you start combining that with the whole world of the BCIs, the brain-computer interfaces, where the simple thing that we've done for overactive bladder, there are other applications that are treating central tremors, other faulty bladder signaling devices. If you're thinking about chronic pain, GI disorders, maybe hypertension, right? As populations age, non-invasive neuromodulation has a tremendous ability to help take patients out of hospitals, keep them at home, reducing the cost of healthcare while also improving their quality of life, which is certainly where I'm coming from. I love neuromodulation because I believe that there are 5, 10 additional, areas that can be explored in non-invasive neuromodulation that have the ability to really impact patients' lives and their quality of life, while also being significantly less expensive for the healthcare system, which the healthcare system likes. If you bring a less expensive device to market, insurers like it. They're not in the business of paying, right? They're in the business of saving money. So when I can go up and I can say, hey, this device will cost you 25% of your alternative, they like us.
Yeah. I can see that. I can see how that would happen. So, we also touched on how you've built your company Zida without institutional or venture capital, which is truly remarkable. For our gurus out there, I'm wondering if at a high level you can share with us, what strategies you used and what lessons other founders can take from this approach.
Sure. I think that leaning on the resources that you have on stakeholders who are close to the issue is the best way to bring a product forward without institutional capital. Institutional capital, I can look at myself in the mirror and say, if I had taken institutional capital that was either offered or wasn't offered, but that was out there, I know I would not be here today. Because the ups and downs of the process of developing a product, FDA, Medicare, and market rollout are so fraught with the need to pivot. And who's to say that your institutional investors are going to want to pivot with you? They're going to want to give you the grace and time that you need in order to move forward. I personally, ended up taking money from friends, family, and at this point, 1 degree of separation from that. Mainly urologists, urogynecologists, doctors who recognize the value of this product, and really, I didn't have to tell them what the product was. I didn't have to tell them why it's going to help patients and why it's good for them. And they could even imagine why insurers should pay for it. So it basically sold itself to them, and they're able to also introduce me to potential prescribers. I don't have that many investors, but the investors that I do have are influential, and they were influential in helping us recruit, call it the primary investigator for our clinical study. Hey, this is my friend. I play golf with him. The funny story is the FDA told us we needed a clinical trial. They would give us 6 months to pull off a clinical trial during COVID. It's like, gosh, I don't know. I don't even know an investigator right now. I don't have one. So one of our investors said, oh, there's a guy I play golf with. I haven't played with him in a while because of COVID, but here's his number. I'll talk to him, and then you give him a call. And within a couple of hours, he was on board. He didn't want a lot of money. He just wanted his costs back. He was in it for the science, which was absolutely amazing. And those are the people that I believe really allow you to be lean. Like I mentioned, we've raised less than $3 million. A lot of that I put in, a lot of my family put in. But by leveraging the experts for what they're good at, which is the expertise, particularly in the age of artificial intelligence, you can tremendously reduce the need for capital, because I think that a lot of the capital that institutional investors make you spend is on the best in class, right? Yeah. If we're going to hire a lawyer, he's got to be the best, from the best firm, because, if it's deniability, right?
Yeah.
If we don't get the result that we're looking for, well, we hired the best lawyer on in New York to do this for us, and yeah, it didn't work out. I'm not at fault. No, this is my company. I'm the CEO. I'm the founder. I'm the inventor. And at the end of the day, the responsibility is mine, and for good and for bad. And so I need to live with that. And therefore, I'm willing to take those risks.
Yeah, what I love about that is at the same time, you're also building a board of advisors, right? That, as you mentioned, can help you over some of those hurdles. But also, I would think that they're very understanding about some of the time delays because they're living through healthcare firsthand, so they understand completely what's involved, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The ability for your investors to understand and have that patience and give you that grace is what allows me to sleep at night, because I believe that if I had, a board that was, breathing down my neck saying, oh, well, you were supposed to hit, 1,000 prescriptions last month and we only hit 872. It was down because who knew that doctors are off, and there's a big drop in prescriptions in the month of December, for example.
Right.
Okay. I didn't know that. I mean, we supposed it, right? We guessed it. We didn't know whether that was going to be 5% down, whether that was going to be, a drop in growth or a drop of overall prescriptions. But, to the doctors, like, oh, yeah, that's not a problem.
Yeah, for sure. So, Isaac, this seems like a really exciting time for Zida. What does the future hold and where do you go from here?
Sure. So this is, really just the beginning of Zida's commercial launch. We're working with prescribers in some of the top medical groups across the nation. So our lawyers have recommended that we do not use their names because some of them have active, very aggressive legal teams. If you use the names of some of the bigger universities on the East Coast and West Coast in the San Francisco area and what have you, but we're getting a lot of prescriptions. In the United States, we're working both with the American Urology Association, with the American Urogynecological Society, the nurses and PAs that do this, and also educating and making patients aware of the product. Our goal is to make the Zida Control Sock first-line therapy for overactive bladder worldwide. In the long term, we see Zida as the platform for at-home neuromodulation, and will allow us to expand into other chronic conditions like some of those that we mentioned. The vision for us is very clear. It's to empower millions to live with dignity, confidence, and control. So that's, that is the future of Zida. And I hope that the model that Zida has been able to take will allow and inspire other inventors, other gurus to lean into their knowledge and their expertise, to have the confidence. And, I'm happy to speak with anybody who may have questions or want to interact on how to make their vision come true. My only skill in life is helping make other people's dreams come true.
Oh, that's awesome. And thank you for that. So, Isaac, I'd first of all like to thank you and acknowledge you for all of the insights and information you brought to us today. If somebody wants to get more information, how do we find out more? Is there a website, LinkedIn? If somebody wants us to take you up on the offer of contacting you, how do we do that?
Sure. So Zida's website is LiveZida, L-I-V-E, Zida.com. There's information both for patients and prescribers. There's links to our clinical evidence also. If somebody would like to reach out to me, it's Isaac and Live Zida, and happy to hear from you, and happy to help everybody make the world a better place.
That's fantastic. So, Isaac, once again, thank you so much for your insights and being our guru today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to MedTech Gurus. I am Sylvester Harris, your MC. If you want to learn more about Tom and his consulting services, you can go to www.pctmedical.com or email Tom at tom@pctmedical.com. Now, I can be reached at Sylvester Harris, that's SylvesterHarris 5048@gmail.com, and I'd be pleased to discuss any voiceover work that you may want for your company or broadcast. Hey, thanks so much for listening, and catch us on the next episode of MedTech Gurus.